Hello, ETHDenver. How are we doing?
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you.
Good. You are the champions. Thank you for staying up until the last session, or one of the last sessions. It's the end of the day. So we're going to try to make this fun, and we're going to try to bring you pretty good content here. So let's get started. I'm going to introduce the speakers. So I've got David Minarsch. He is the leader of the team that built the first framework for developing multi-agent systems in the blockchain space. He's the CEO and co-founder of Valerie and a founding member of OLAS. We've got Sydney Lai, the CTO and co-founder at Gaia. Gaia is focusing on distributing access to AI inferencing, and she's focused on developing adoption for infrastructure tools and has built developer funnels for 8 tools, engaging over 2 million developers. 9 years on blockchain, that's a long time. And she has contributed to Consensus, Mantle, Filecoin, the Graph, and OX protocol. And finally, another David Sneider, the co-founder at Lead Protocol, which is the first distributed key management network currently securing more than 100 million in crypto assets and 25 million in encrypted data assets. Lead Protocol is a key enabler of user-controlled AI agents. And prior to Lit, David was a co-founder at a software-as-a-service company acquired by LinkedIn. And your moderator, me, Paul Lanski, is the founder and CEO of Dabnode. And we have more than 1.4 billion TVL in Ethereum validators, validating on our free open source software that allows people to run Web3 infrastructure from their own homes. All right, are we ready?
Ready.
Let's set the stage. So we're going to be talking about decentralized AI, but I'd like to know what is wrong with centralized AI. I mean, as far as I know, it works pretty well, right? Anthropic, OpenAI. What's wrong with it? Why do we need decentralized AI?
Well, I think one point when we need it is when we want to take control of the AI. So when we want to fully own it as a user, understand what it's doing, maybe bring our own biases to it, rather than consuming someone else's product. I think it's a bit like, control, like in crypto, we're all about controlling our keys. And with this concept of decentralized AI, it's about maybe like kind of controlling your own AI and the data that goes into it and the models that go into it. So I think that's one way to answer it, but I'm sure we have others.
Another way, there's a big talk of alignment in the context of AI. Largely that's concerned with the ethics of the machine intelligence itself. But for me, one of the main concerns of centralized AI is the untalked about part of alignment, which is, to David's point, who controls these models. And we can look just as recently as kind of the unfolding around social media in 2016 and the splintering of and bifurcation of society into multiple camps, because you had commercial companies, potentially with some government nudges in the background, basically driving to an outcome of, let's keep people scrolling on this page, doom scrolling by any means necessary, because there's a profit incentive to do so, and the externalities of that were quite significant. And so the fear is, in a centralized AI world, we have that, but with order of magnitude larger negative effects.
I would say for us, one of the most important things about differentiating from centralized AI is that for true autonomous AI applications, it truly requires decentralization. If you have a centralized AI, it is really mimicking artificial intelligence. You already see this right now with, I'm going to say it, with your Alexa, your smart home device. Oh, you've run out of toilet paper. Let me deliver you some more toilet paper. That is not true autonomous artificial intelligence. It just understands your purchase behaviors, and not even in a dynamic way, because it just sees, okay, this month it's time for your toilet paper, next month it's time for your toilet paper, but it doesn't actually understand, did you actually deplete all of your resources? So for us, the obsession is to have true autonomous, nuanced artificial applications. It requires decentralized knowledge domains, yeah.
All right, so there's there's a quote from Andrej Karpathy that resonates with pretty much what you guys said. And in crypto, we have this not your keys, not your crypto. And Karpathy mentioned not your weights, not your brain, in the sense that if you don't control what's in the AI, what's like the AI itself, the LLM, the model, if you don't know what goes in there, it's not necessarily working for you. You don't know for whom it's working. And I'd like to talk about trust now, because I think trust is like a point that we are very familiar with in Web3. But in AI, what are the trust assumptions that we're getting from these decentralized actors? What are the trust assumptions that we have?
I mean, it's fully trusted. When you type something into OpenAI, you know, you're even to what model is being used, you're just trusting what's on the front end. There's the entire stack is trusted. Right.
So in decentralized AI, how does that change? What assurances do we have, or like what?
Did you say centralized?
Assurance.
Decentralized now. In decentralized AI.
For assurance, there's two types, right? Number one is when you look at how ownership has been done in centralized AI, you'll see the different, let's say, like news sources that have sued OpenAI for scraping vague and vast models to take that information. One of the things that we're tackling at Gaia is understanding how do you upload your own data sets. We get a lot of requests from, let's say, law firms. We have a lot of requests from universities, even those who specialize in specific data sets on training. What this looks like on practice is, if you use the analogy of YouTube, what our framework is doing is, you'll see the analogy of YouTube. They are building applications, white labeling YouTube content videos, and monetizing on their own domains. What we enable is for different applications, projects who have their own specialized knowledge, such as law firms, universities, to be able to build businesses on top of that. We can also talk about the different trusts and currently what teams are currently doing with like TE, zkML, and how we tackle those. But I also want to make sure you have a chance to share your perspective as well.
Yeah. No, they were great points, and I think like for the audience, like it's important to pick apart maybe the different layers of the technology stack. So obviously you've got the data at the beginning. You know, most of those models are trained on a corpus of open web scrape data plus like proprietary data. Then you have like the training run, which is hugely proprietary in most cases, and then you have the model itself, like with the weights, and that can sometimes even be open, right? There's now quite a few cases, and then you have the point of inference, right? So when you kind of basically calling the model, you're prompting it, as we all probably did in the audience, and you get a response, and then the question is like, where is it running, right? Like, and what's the underlying infrastructure there? Like, is it some centralized provider doing this, who I trust that they're running this thing, like David was saying, or is there maybe like some like kind of smart technology, let's say, like in simple words, like Eli 5, right? Like so ZK technology or some TEEs or something like that.
If I may.
Yeah, just one last point and I'll hand it back to you. And then like after all this, you have the actual application on top, right? Like in most cases, the application isn't the model itself. It's like something built around the model. So then it's like, okay, is it an AI agent maybe in social, which tweets somewhere, right? So then it interacts maybe by design with some centralized platforms like Twitter, and maybe with some decentralized platforms like a Ledger, where it maybe has like a wallet, right? And so then you have the question around like, okay, how does that interaction happen? Where does this system even live? Like, is this agent something you as the owner, you're the owner of? Like you have it on your local device, it's open source software, you can modify it, see it, whatever. Or is it something which maybe someone else offers as a service to you? And so there's many different layers, and it's actually like we have to be very concrete, I think, to really pick it apart. But yeah, back to your point.
I think trust in decentralized AI is a very big conversation, because what I've seen, for example, with Lit Protocol, the question is, how do you trust by giving keys to an agent? Because I think with the last few years in this space, trust of your keys is to another entity or another cooperatively owned entity. And so now how do you provide that trust, let's say, from a key management situation? We talked briefly about TE, but TE is commonly, you have to trust your hardware, as an example, and it doesn't scale very well if hardware is outdated. Then there's the question of on-prem, which we were talking about. So if you're running these models locally and you have your own access to your own keys, your own weights, then another concept is, do you trust yourself? And some developers or some people are like, I don't trust myself to build this own. I actually rather just offboard it to you and you can just handle it, because I don't trust myself with like losing my keys or whatever the case may be.
And I guess one other comment here in the open versus closed setup, we talked a little bit about like, what does a malicious centralized AI look like? But then it's also worth considering what's the opportunity costs of building the new economy in the context of a bunch of gigantic centralized operators. And to me, it feels like in that direction, we miss out on what is potentially the most groundbreaking of this technology, which are these vast societal upgrades, things like a decentralized collective intelligence that could functionally be really owned by nobody, but everybody can contribute to. And those type of applications, which are still very much on the periphery, like the infrastructure is still being laid to enable those type of things, like what the team at Recall did with lit protocol encryption of encrypting agent memory with MotherDAO. Those are like starting to point the pathway forward in terms of the next level AI applications. And to me, that's much more of an exciting prospect around, we need open AI because we get large scale societal upgrades, rather than we need to make these systems decentralized because of a fear motivated reaction.
Right. So I want to talk about latent, especially like out of giving agency to these agents, right? Giving the power, giving the power to sign things for you. But I would like to stop for a minute to two things that Sydney said. First of all, thank you, David, for laying down the different layers. And then I'd like to dig into one of these layers a little bit with you, Sydney, because you mentioned like how can we provide our own data to these models, right? And I think here is where really trust comes into place. When you're giving your data to one of these centralized actors for their LLM to process, you really have absolutely no assurance that this data stays yours and yours only. But not only this, but also you don't really have the assurance that it's making the best out of this data. So how can we deal with this differently? How do we create models that truly work for us and not for an unspecified actor or like the owner of the machines?
Yeah, I think something that you just talked about, which is what does this look like in a practicality standpoint? If I do a quick refresher, if we look at how centralized AI is currently created, it is on the backs of the data that has been created for years. These models are scraping YouTube, blogs, a lot of these generalized content. One of the reasons why the importance of having very specialized data is that if you, let's say, go to ChatGPT, Gemini, you ask very vague questions, and it will pull information, but you actually don't know, is that from a peer researched data set, or is that from someone who has a blog post that talks like they know that information, but they don't have citations.
Right.
That's when you start to see, let's say, hallucinations as an example. Now you're talking about how do you build this verification in the current space in Web3. I can talk about it in one sentence, like very generally, and I can talk about it in one sentence for Gaia. So from a general perspective, right now, it's a lot about verifying the data sets. Like, do you actually own the data sets? Are the data sets actually relevant? One of the approaches that we've taken, which is not TE, which is not zkML, is surprisingly still a token staked model behind how do you actually verify this is the data that you do own, that because this requires a lot of nuance, and we believe that the current security models cannot handle nuance very well, which is why we didn't take a very concrete security example for securitizing those data sets.
Gotcha. Okay, let's move on to agents. So agents, it's like everywhere. Probably everybody here that's planning to hack something will at some point touch an agent. But like, what are desirable properties of a good agent and what's a bad agent? I mean, we just go onto Twitter and we see a lot of bad agents. We see a lot of bullshit, a lot of ChatGPT regurgitated shit.
You mean bots?
Yeah, exactly. There's a difference. There's no difference between this shit and bots, right? But what is a good agent? What are desirable properties?
Yeah, I mean, I think an agent is just a software product. Like a good agent is an agent that is something that somebody wants. It's like no different than what's a good startup, what's a good app, what's a good software product. So I know that's kind of like a general answer. And then within that, in the context of crypto agents, we're kind of seeing two camps. We're seeing those of the what they would call the internet cinematic universe, which is a lot of the agents that are posting on Twitter. And then we're seeing agents that look a lot more like software products, which is there are things that people used to do that were tedious and annoying that are now automated. Things like automated yield optimization across various DeFi protocols, dollar cost averaging across top coins, where they used to have a human in the loop to understand data, to click a button to make a purchase. And the work that we've done at Lit Protocol with the Lit Agent Wallet is basically like OAuth for assets, where you can grant an agent runtime some scoped and specific ability to use certain assets with a certain spending limit on a certain contract or blockchain, make it as broad or specific as you want. And you can almost kind of think about this as an app store for agents in many ways, where you're saying, here, I'm giving this agent runtime this set of permissions, and then that agent runtime, just like an app you install on your phone, needs to provide a benefit to the user such that they are going to pay for it, deposit their funds in it, et cetera. Very curious about David's take here, though.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because it gets also back at the decentralization. Like, the answer will be different for everyone, right? Like, what's a good and what's a bad agent? And it can only really be different if we have like very big diversity in the terms of agents, and if we can effectively own our own agents that do things that are very specific to us. I really truly believe we will end up in a world where all of us will have hundreds of agents that in some cases augment our life, right? So we are there and we're doing something and this agent helps us right there and then. And in some cases autonomously do stuff for us in the background. So for instance, a self-driving car whilst I'm reading something or chatting to someone. Or like my trading bot that does things on behalf of me, maybe on the OLA stack with like Lit protocol like assurances or not kind of going off the rails, right? So these are some examples, but in all those cases, for them to truly be like good to me, they need to be aligned with me. And then one big topic in like AI is always this question of alignment. And then people like, well, how can we align the AIs? And the thing is, well, we can't even align ourselves. Like the four of us won't align on something, like let alone the world, right? So one big, I think, requirement is that we enable everyone to have like really customized, really purpose-built agents for themselves. And decentralized AI, in its sort of abstract sense, I think can enable that.
I think this is what we talk about in terms of going hyper vertical, right? Because how useful is a general model versus, like when you go on, for example, I keep using the analogy of YouTube, you don't watch a general YouTuber, right? You watch a YouTuber that specializes in plants, and then maybe you're interested in a humidifier. So then you'll go and watch a YouTuber talk and review all these different humidifiers. It's the same thing. You're not looking for a general YouTuber that will talk about plants and humidifiers and what cars fixing, something like that. And I think my easy answer to you, which is what makes a good agent, I think it's product market fit. If that agent has product market fit, it's a good agent. If it has a user base.
Excellent. So I see several like threads of what you guys are saying. Number one is that if we concentrate the brain power of these like agents or these new economies, these new AIs, if we concentrate all these in like the four main foundational models, we're missing out on the benefit of actual decentralized intelligence. Secondly, agents must be personalized to be good, and personalized with our own data, personalized with our own use cases, with our own preferences, weights, maybe, and maybe with access to our own assets as well. Okay. We've run out of time, but that has been an amazing panel. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.
In 20 minutes, I hope
so much.
we could teach you something.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.